I'm Stefan Baumann. I would like to invite you on a special journey to discover the splendor, encounter the grandeur, feel the excitement. Come along with me as we experience the thrill of painting outdoors. A 3-day journey that will change your art forever. In one of America's most stunning locations, Mount Shasta. Everything you need to know is on our website, www.stefanbaumann.com. So how was that for everybody?
Good.
You had a good time?
Well, I have decided to continue with this workshop.
You decided?
Yeah.
It's worthwhile.
Yeah.
Good. I was really amazed at how well you did. Really, really well done. Now, the reason why I start off my workshops like this, a lot of times when you go to a workshop, the first thing they do is they say, oh, I'm going to be giving a demo. And so they stand up here and they give a demo for 3 hours. And I have done that on times when the weather's really bad. I have done that. I've actually sat up here and did a 3-hour, I said, we're going to do a 3-hour demo. And you know what happens after about an hour? Natives get restless. It's crazy.
Does it take a whole hour
What?
for them to get restless?
It takes an hour, usually it's like watching paint dry. And then I always tell people, if you want to watch people paint, YouTube is filled with all of that. For hours you could sit and watch people paint. And if you want to watch me paint, you can watch me paint on YouTube for free, or I'll give you a free DVD. How's that? Then you can watch me paint. Now, there are times when I feel like painting is important, I got to get a point across. What I have found oftentimes when I used to start my workshops, I would sit and paint, and I'd say, here, this is the way I go do it. Now, since it's so awkward for you guys to try to be here and do everything, and then while you're in this chaos of being in this workshop, you try to put on my happy little face and do what I do. And the problem with that is that I've been doing it for 40 years. And a lot of you decide you want to be Baumannettes. Some of you are Baumannites because you're men. You just kind of get out there and you just kind of put on my hat and then you just kind of go crazy with it.
I'm going with Cezanne.
You could be Cezanne. You look like Cezanne. Hopefully you're not quite as crazy as he is. But anyway, so the problem that we have with that is that they'll go off and they'll start doing that, and I'll say, this is the way that I do it, and then they'll try it, and then it gets runs away from them. And I have found over teaching, now I've been teaching plein air painting for almost 40 years. I've had hundreds of students. I've taken them to Yosemite. And when I used to take students to Yosemite, we would go there and I would have them paint just like I did with you guys. I would just drop them in Yosemite and we'd be there for a week. And the first day I would say is just go out and paint. And then 12 o'clock would roll around, we'd go across the street and I'd go paint. And then they would go paint. And then we'd come in and have a critique. And then the following day I would say, come back and paint. Except that day, I would say be prepared to have several canvases around. Not telling them that what was going to happen. So the following day, I'd have them meet even earlier. We would line up in a big caravan, and I would sit there. If you weren't there exactly at the time that we would say at 7 o'clock, ready to go, you'd be left behind. I'd roll up, everybody would roll behind me, and we would roll out. And we would probably roll out about 30 or 40 feet. And I'd say, okay, that's it. We're going to get out and start painting. And we would all get out of the cars and we would start setting up and paint. And I would wander around and I would go about an hour into it and I'd go, okay, let's pack up and let's go. And they go, wait a minute. I said, you got to be prepared. So they would all pack up and go and load up the car. I said, we have places to go. So they would run and pack up everything because they know at this point that I'm going to leave them behind. It was just a good thing that it was only a few feet away from where we were. Then what I would do is I would get them all lined up, get their cars started. We would come out of there into the road, and then the very next spot where you could pull over, I'd pull them over. Maybe quarter of a mile down the road. And then we'd unpack again. I'd say, okay, we're going to be painting here. Now, a few of the smart ones would say, how long are we going to be here? And I go, I don't know. Depends. On what? I don't know. One of the things you're going to find out with plein air painting is you don't know how long you're going to be there, because I can't tell you how many times I've actually been someplace and somebody comes by and says, you can't be here. The park does not allow it. Yeah, so they'll say the park doesn't allow it. So the thing that I want to get across is that if you don't know, you better kind of decide what your painting's going to be and put that in first. This is not a leisurely activity. And so I would say, you better kind of think about the last place we were at and kind of judge your time. And about that much time, I would say, okay, let's go, pack up, let's go. Everybody pack up, load up in the car, and we'd drive right across the street to the next turnout. In Yosemite, almost every curve has got a turnout, at least back then. And I'd unpack again. They go, well, why didn't we carry all this stuff over here? And I say, because in plein air painting, you've got to be unpredictable. You never know. So let's go out and paint. Now, one thing that I've determined is that it doesn't matter where you are to paint. And one of the things that I learned really early when I was a little kid, and the first painting trip I went on was, I was 12, and we were in Hawaii. And we went out to the island, and the teachers set us up, and we started painting. And the teacher said, you know what? I don't like this view. Let's pack up and go to the other side of the beach, because I don't like the palm trees on that side. So we drove all the way over there, and he looked out and he said, I don't like this either. Let's drive to the next beach. So we just kind of went in the cars and drove over there. He got out. It's not what I expected. Let's just go a little further down the road. We did that all day. And I don't know if you guys know, but Hawaii is an island. We spent all day driving around that island looking for something to paint, and we ended up right where we started off at. So it doesn't pay to wander around looking for a perfect place. I did that to those people. My goal that day was them to have 15 paintings started. I had them unpack, pack, move cars in between, no lunch break, no pee break. They had to figure out everything for themselves. At about 1 o'clock, I had 12 to 15 absolutely crazy women, because that's pretty much all I had at that time, ready to kill me. They were hungry. They had to pee. They did 8 paintings by that point, and they were ready to kill me. They had wished that they'd never gone. And I kept going. I kept going all day long. And you know what? We did 15 paintings that day, and then we had a critique. And I critiqued the paintings that they did the first day, the two that they were leisurely painting all day. And I compared all of them. Now, if you've got 15 ladies with 15 paintings, you can imagine how much artwork we had during that critique.
220.
Quick. 225 paintings. You probably were thinking that before I even got through with the equation. He's a mathematician, so that's his thing. Okay, so you can imagine how long that critique is. But you know what they found out? Is that it wasn't how long you painted a painting or whether or not you were even like set up comfortably. It wasn't whether or not you had a really good spot or the perfect spot. Because some of the places that I stopped them at was just another turn in the road. I mean, I stopped them in places where there was nothing to paint. And I told them, go find something. Do you know at the end of the day, the paintings that turned out the best were the ones done in the afternoon where the ladies were so frustrated with me. They hated me so much, they were flinging paint on the canvas with no thought. I'm not going to do that to you. But I've had practice with that. There is so much that comes up with painting, and so much has to do with what we think it should be, and also how it feels, and how we have this romantic image. Oh, we're going to go to Mount Shasta, and we're going to paint with Stefan in one of the most beautiful places. You have to admit, this is beautiful up here.
Yeah,
Isn't today just gorgeous?
it's beautiful.
It's like, whoa, you guys are so lucky. But you have all this pre-expectations of what this is going to be like. And part of it is that I've got to kind of tell you the reality of what it is. Most of the times when we've had workshops here, it's been raining. And a lot of times you'll set up someplace and then all of a sudden it's a downpour. We experienced that when we were in Italy. When we were in Italy, we sat up and all of a sudden there it went, the rain. And then what do you do? What do you do when it gets like that? And we were in Florence, when it rains, it rains. I mean, it is like somebody just dumping a bucket. And the lightning and thunder is just crazy. And so what we did was we took one of the husbands that came along on the trip, because the husbands get to do some work. And we secretly, behind the scenes, not letting all the other students know, we dressed him up as Bacchus, the god of wine. And we put him in a turban, and we made, because we were right there at the winery, we gave him a headdress of grape leaves and grapes, and he had grapes, and we set him up and we painted him. So he sat and painted for us. So when there's nothing else to paint, we painted him. But you have to be that way, because if you go on a trip like this and you're going to go plein air painting, and all of a sudden you can't do that, you've got to figure out something else to paint real quick. Now painting somebody sitting there posing, and you're painting from life, is that plein air painting?
Could be.
It is, because what is plein air painting? Painting in the air, right? Like outdoors. Basically, plein air painting is painting from life. Alla prima painting, it's all kind of the same thing. It's like learning how to paint from life. And so whether you're painting Half Dome in Yosemite or Bacchus, it's still the same thing. And so if you're ever outdoors painting, you kind of have to get real quick. You don't sit there and go, oh, it's raining today, I'm not going to paint. Then sit in your car and paint from the windshield. Try to figure out something real quick. One of the things that I like to tell people is that if you saw Sargent, and people would write about Sargent and what it was like to watch him paint. And they would see him with all of his umbrellas and stuff out there, and he'd wander out into the field, and he was like looking down for the most part while all the artists are trying to find a view. And he was looking down trying to find a comfortable place to sit. Because some of you probably realize that standing for a while can be kind of difficult if you're going to be there all day. So he wasn't like Moses looking for the promised land like we did in Hawaii. I call that like Moses, the Moses syndrome, where you keep looking for the promised land and it never happens. And then you die in some desert all by yourself. So he'd find a comfortable place to sit. He'd sit down, and they said it was like opening up clamshells. These big umbrellas would just open up from the earth. And he'd situate himself real comfortably in all these umbrellas. And once he was comfortable, he'd look up. And whatever was there, he'd paint, however it was. And I noticed some of you are like, You know, with plein air painting, it's just the gist of whatever you see. In fact, you're not out there to paint the scene entirely anyway. And if some of you think that, you're very foolish, because you'll never capture it. The one thing that you can't capture is that every 7 minutes the light's changing. Some of you experienced that this morning. Mount Shasta was virtually kind of in shadow when we got there, and you saw the light changing. And some of you changed your paintings with the light. And at the end you realized it's pretty flat now. It was actually better an hour ago. The moment you see something and you're inspired by it, that's what you go to paint. And the biggest mistake that plein air painters do is that they constantly are changing the light. As the light changes, they change their painting. And if you ever look at Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting, in there, the last chapter of it, and when I was giving the demonstration in the plein air convention, I had 250 people, and you guys were there. They had 250 people in the room. And I said, how many of you have read Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting? Remember me saying that? And everybody was, and I asked everybody, so what is the last chapter in that book? And not one person stood up and said anything. And it's like the most important chapter of it. Do you know what the chapter is?
No, my eyes crossed before I got to the last chapter.
He's hard to read, but it's a short read. Have you read it from end to end?
I haven't made it to the end yet.
Have
I've
you?
been working.
I think I did, but I honestly don't remember.
That was a year and a half ago that I was mentioning that.
Yeah.
But the last chapter of Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting is the only book you need to buy. You don't need McPherson's book. You don't need all these other books that are being written by all these plein air painters. All of the books they're all nonsense. Everything that you possibly need is in that Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. And the issue that you want to get is that there are just certain things that happen in nature and you have to understand them. The other painters will tell you colors and stuff like that, but he actually lines it out, and everybody who's writing a book basically models their technique to whatever Carlson said. But you can pretty much rely on it. But his last chapter is memorization. The most important thing you can do is learn how to memorize things. And for the most part, when you guys set up, you set up looking at your subject, and you go in and you put footnotes in. Now remember, I told you have no idea how long you're going to be there. In fact, this afternoon, I might very well do the same thing I did to my students in Yosemite. Even though I told you I wasn't going to, don't rely on that. I told you you can't believe anything or anyone. But anyway, so what you want to do is you want to get up and you want to put in the footnotes and paint very fast. And you want to put in your highlights and suggestion of what happens at that point. Because usually when you set up the first thing in the morning, if you notice, it was much more beautiful in the morning when we started than it was in the afternoon. The reason why I give this talk now is because the light isn't so nice this morning. And that's why I don't give a talk before we start our class, because I'm using up your good light. So you go out there, you paint, and you notice towards the afternoon it gets a little boring. The light gets a little bit duller. It's not quite as beautiful out there. Not as beautiful as it was. So what you do is you quickly put in footnotes. Now, Monet said that the light changes every 7 minutes. And I've never studied that myself, but I do believe that Monet probably had an angle on that, and he's probably correct. So you got 7 minutes to do your painting. Not an hour, not 3 hours. That's what I was trying to teach those ladies in Yosemite. We did 15 paintings that day. Some of them 10, 15, 20 minutes. They got better paintings done in that short period of time than what they spent all day doing it. We would look at their paintings they did at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when they were so pissed off at me. They were flinging paint on there. And you know what they were doing? They were putting lights and darks and lights and darks and dun, 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 dun. Okay, let's go. Those paintings were more powerful, more correct, more dynamic than anything that they did the day before where they had 4 or 5 hours painting each painting. And what they got real quick is that it's not about how much time you have. It's about what you do with that time. And so if you start off your painting correctly and you put in your lights and your shadows and your footnotes, and you give yourself 7 minutes to do it in, then what you do is you pick up your easel. This one's not that easy to pick up. And you turn it this way. And then you turn your back to the subject matter. So now Mount Shasta is back here, and you're this way. Now the problem is with plein air painting is that when people are painting, they're like painting. No. So anyway, that's what happens. The problem is that you're spending too much time looking at your scene and not at your painting. Now, what's important when you leave? That you go home with a plein air painting that's beautiful, not that you rendered the place perfectly. What happens out there doesn't matter anymore. And you go, well, why are we out there painting? And you're out there painting because you do get adjusted to the colors and all that beautiful stuff. But that changes too. But what a beautiful activity to be outdoors and paint and see things. And at the end you have a beautiful painting. And if you can remove yourself from the subject and you have all of the footnotes on your painting, and you concentrate now in your painting as if you're in your studio, and if you need a color or something, you can turn around and go, oh yeah, that's how that mountain is shaped, or that's the color that I need. How does that snow look? Oh, it's like this. And you start moving the paint around using your artistic skills that you've developed in your studio, you're going to be a better painter. A lot of you who do phone coaching with me, you go out there and paint, and then you send your image to me, and I go, well, you need to put the snow in. And you go, oh, yeah. And I go, well, how would you do that? And all of a sudden you go, well, I'd like to put some here, and I'd reserve some of this over there. Well, the mountain might give you a totally different thing, and artistically you might actually like manipulate the snow so it's better the way you want it. Because nobody's going to check to see if you're good or not. Most people judge whether or not they're good on location by how accurate their scene is. But the reality is, I don't care how long you paint. Whatever you paint outdoors will suck in comparison to what you're looking at. Because out there, you have the glory of God. You've got lights and you've got shadows. You've got beautiful colors that are reflecting the sun, shimmering in the lights. You've got dark, cool shadows lurking and beautiful techniques and stuff. And what do you have on your easel? A piece of cloth covered with a bunch of colored mud. You will never get that as beautiful as that. And everybody who goes out and plein air paints is trying to compare what they do to what's out there, and they kill themselves the whole time going, it's not that good, it's not that good, it's not that good. Well, no, it's not. It's never that good. So you have to get right off at the beginning that you got to lower your expectations. You got to lower your expectations about coming up here. Whatever it is that you thought this was going to be, this is the reality of it. And a lot of times you got mosquitoes and bugs. The good thing about being up here in Mount Shasta, I have no idea why, but we don't have mosquitoes up here. You won't be doing this the whole time. And in a lot of the places that we go to elsewhere, like Yosemite and Lake Tahoe and stuff, and if you read things about people who travel to Alaska and things, that's one of the biggest problems is all the mosquitoes. In the Sierras, the mosquitoes are horrible. And if you're spending your time doing this all the time, it's hard to concentrate. But here you don't have to worry about that. Did any of you get bit by a mosquito today? And didn't you find that kind of weird? There weren't any flies?
It's a little chilly.
It's a little cold, but that's plein air painting. Then it got hot.
Yeah.
Then the wind kicks up. Then the rain kicks. And the thing is, even that you can't predict as much as we'd like. It's surprising, though, that the thing that's the worst for plein air painters is the wind. The wind is absolutely the worst thing that you can deal with. So, any questions? No? Well, welcome to the workshop. There's all kinds of setups that you can bring to plein air painting. The thing that you want to make sure that when you're going out to plein air paint, that you're prepared. When we went to Florence, I mean, how many of you have gone to Florence to go paint? 2 of you. It's expensive to go, isn't it? It's not cheap. It's not like, it's even expensive to come up here. But what was amazing is that people would make that trek out to Florence to go paint, and they would not have supplies that would be able to work for them. A couple of them made homemade plein air boxes out of cigar boxes, and they wondered why they were having so much problem with their supplies out there. When we first started painting, they had the French easel, which some of you had. You had the French easel.
Well, it's not my usual.
I know, but why? What's the issue with the French easel that folds out and all that?
Oh, it's a pain to set up, it's a pain to take down, and it's heavy.
It's heavy. You know, when you watch me on the TV show, we use the French easel. And why do we use a French easel? It's cool. It's a beautiful easel. And the thing is, the only 2 easels, if you're going to go that route, the only 2 that are good are the Julians and the Maybeffs. Everything else is crap.
That's
Okay.
what I do.
Yeah, so if you have Julians or Maybeffs, you're okay. Everything else you might as well just dump. And don't even try to sell it because you don't want that burden to go to anybody you would sell it to. You know, they say you got a car that you wouldn't even sell to your best friend. That's what those other easels. Costco one time came out with a French easel, and it popped up in my class a lot. And I was like, oh my God, I could have just smashed every one of them. But the Julians and the Maybeffs are the only one to have.
They didn't smash.
Yeah, what's surprising is that they work really well. The Julians and the Maybeffs. And the thing is, we used them out doing our television show, and they lasted for the whole show. They were great. But you notice I put mine on my back, and I actually converted my accordion straps that I used to play with the accordion. I put them on, so I had them on the box, and I carried around my back. But even that's too heavy. So the one that you see me walking around on the TV show, that's actually a prop. It's hollowed out. So I took out all the insides and everything like that. There's no paint or anything. And so I could wander around easily. But if I had to carry it like that, no way. So the Julian easel is only good if you're going to sit in your trunk and paint. That's about as good as it is. If you're a man and you can really get out there and haul it around, then it's fine. But in the meanwhile, they have come up with all kinds of easels and adaptions. Back when I first started teaching, you only had the open box M, which was like $1 million, especially back then, to buy. They had no competition. They were the only thing that they had, and they were good. But there's been a lot of technology that has gone into these plein air easels. And for the longest time, it was the box, the box, the box. Then it was the easel, the easel, the easel. And now it's kind of a combination of both. The one thing that I suggest everybody have, and this is what we used in Florence, this is a thumb box. And the reason why they called it a thumb box is that it has a hole in the bottom for your thumb. artists don't have like a huge IQ, so they kind of keep things simple. I don't know, what do we call that? Well, you stick your thumb in it, let's call it a thumb box. Anyway, so when this opens up, and this is what we used when we were downtown Florence. And you know, everybody says, oh, you can't paint in downtown Florence. It's like, yeah, you can. And we got photos to prove it. But we just sat there on the main square, and we put this on our lap. We put our canvases in here. This holds your paints and everything and your brushes. And you just sit there and you paint. So this is the box that we were sitting at. And while I was sitting there, it was so cool. I was sitting with all my students, and we're sitting in the main square there, right where the statue of David is, outside. And so we're sitting there, and I'm painting, and all of a sudden I hear, hey, you! Yo, you! And I look up, and it's one of the museum guys dressed up in a suit. And I thought he was going to tell us we had to leave, right? And while you're out there, you're thinking you're going to get kicked off at any moment. And he goes, you're famous, aren't you?
Nice.
And I said, I don't know, I'm dressed like a pirate in the middle of Italy. I don't know, maybe I am. And he goes, I watch you on YouTube. He says, I take art classes there. And he said that he recognized me because of my outfit. And he said, you know, obviously I stood out. And he said that he recognized me from there. And he said, my teacher requires us to watch your YouTube channel whenever you have a new YouTube. And so that was kind of cool to be recognized in Italy. But anyway, so there we are doing that. Now, my students, when we were in Italy, we all went to Zecchi's. And Zecchi's is the art store that Michelangelo bought art supplies in. It's been there ever since then. And so any artist that goes to Florence has to go to Zecchi's and buy something. And I was mulling over this beautiful thumb box. This is more like a hand box. And it has Zecchi's on it. And I said, oh my God, if you have to have a souvenir from Florence and you're an artist, you've got to have this, right? So I didn't have the money for it. But, so I bought the brush holder, wherever that is. The brush holder has Zecchi's on it. Oh, here it is. This is really great. I've always wanted a leather one. And this is what holds your brushes, and you put it in a tube. But anyway, so the reason why I bring this in is not to brag about that, but kind of. This is a hand box, which is the same thing as a thumb box, but it's a little bit bigger. Okay? And the reason why they call it a hand box is because when you open it up, you can put your hand in there. So you actually can hold the box this way, which means that you hold it this way and then you can paint. It doesn't have all the space and stuff, but it's a bigger spot, and this would be your palette and this would be your paint. So when I hear people go, oh, I can't go outdoors to paint, or I can't go to Italy and paint because it's too cumbersome, it's too difficult, too much stuff to carry. Really? It's not. You can just sit down in fact, with my thumb box, I sat in the back of a church once and painted. And boxes now, there's so many awesome things that you can get out there. And there's a new company called Strata. Out of all the boxes, this seems to be the thing that's kind of rising up. It is a little on the heavy side, but it's really, really well made. And the Strata boxes are great. Everything's kind of worked on pressure, so you don't have anything to tighten up, which a lot of people have to do and then untighten. So it's really kind of a good system. It sits on your thing, and it's a really good product. For the longest time when we were doing the TV show, we had to buy tripods for our cameras. And we spent sometimes more money on the tripod than we did on the camera itself. Tripods are like crucial. When I have students that are working outdoors, they can have all the fancy boxes that they want. The failure is always in the tripod somewhere. Either the connection of the tripod to the box, or the connection, to just the tripod itself, how it actually sets up. You can't cut down on this. And Strata, I always thought, we always kind of like looked at the carbon tripods for us, because when we went to the national parks, because carbon is so light. And it's very, very sturdy. The aluminums are not. They can kind of break. And I always thought, oh man, we'd love to buy a carbon tripod, but they were so outrageous. And some of the tripods that you buy are so long that when you put them in your backpack, they lean over, they're very uncomfortable, and they stick up. And so now they've started to produce tripods, and Strata engineered one now that is actually made out of carbon. And it's inexpensive compared to what we used to have to pay. This tripod would have been over $1,000 if it were in the olden days. So, but what the great thing about this is that it folds this way, so it makes it shorter. It's much lighter, and it's really easy. And it runs about $150. And it is a nice, strong, lightweight. And the thing is with tripods is you want to make sure that they work and they're tight, they don't slide. And he has used absolutely the best, and I've fallen in love with this tripod. It's absolutely great, and it folds up so small. And if you notice, what's great about it is that it gives you everything you want. You take it and you flip it this way, and now it becomes a really solid thing. It comes with this really great head on it that you can do anything with it. So, and you can put that onto any of your boxes. So it's really a great deal. So that's that. The new system that I got, that I fell in love with, is this. And this is a variation of the tripod that's attached to here. So the box is no longer sitting on the head anymore. The only thing that's sitting on the head is where you put your canvas, and that's this part right in here. And the main box that it sits on here like this, down below. And what that does is it gives you a nice big space for you to work on down here. So you're no longer working with your canvas up here, but this now separates and you're looking down on this and across at this. So this is the new system that they've come up with. But it's wood and it's heavy. Now, if you develop a plastic one, there's a market for it, because there are some people who are a little bit more guerrilla painters than I am. And they would love to be able to climb Mount Everest and bring an easel with them. So I wish you would have gotten more of the dark colors in the front. Some of you are really hesitant about getting dark values in the front of your painting. In here, we want to get dark tones, pure color. In the front is you want pure color, pure value, dark tones, color right out of the tube. Get those colors there, and that should push the value further back. I would like to have seen the background values are a little bit too dark. I'd like to have seen them push back a little bit. You would have done well having a color checker, just to check that. Now the thing is, what she developed, what she saw, is yeah, it takes a long time to check your color. After you get one or two of the values correct, once you kind of got it started, it kind of rolled along much easier. Yeah. Sometimes it's just that first couple of things. So if you can nail the first couple of values, like the shadows in the mountains and the mountains by themselves, with the light on them next to each other, then you kind of go, okay, there's my palette right there. And then you put the mountain in front of it, and you kind of check that to what you've originally had. But if the first two colors aren't right, the third color is going to be impossible to find. So really, how you start a painting is the most important. Most plein air paintings die within the first 10 minutes of your attempt. In fact, most paintings die because you didn't spend 10 minutes prior your painting to decide what it is that you want to paint. You should have no business starting to paint unless you can actually see what it is you want on your canvas. And most people just start painting like crazy people. What you want to do is visualize what would that look like on canvas. And then you want to cautiously, perfectly start from the beginning, making sure it's correct. If you start off slow and get it right, you can start building on that. If you like to take your painting to the next level, regardless at whatever level you are, please feel free to contact me at 415-606-9074. Join us on our website, thegrandview.org, and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting, along with a free diagram of today's subject.